deals that Google has done as examples of those.
Cool. Elad, how did the initial discussions start off with Mixer Labs?
I guess I'd go back to an old saying, which is companies don't get sold, they get bought. And I think our case was an example of that, where we basically had a hosted geolocation service, and we were going through a large list of partners that we were actually trying to get on board as a partner who would actually pay us for the service in terms of, we'd bill them monthly kind of thing. And after the third or fourth conversation, I got an email from Ev, who at the time was the CEO of Twitter, saying, hey, we don't think it makes sense to have you do this as a partner, but we'd love to talk about having you come in-house to actually work with us. And that's sort of what kicked off the discussions.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Let's stick with you for a minute. Another common theme among folks' questions was timing and when to start talking. Elad, let me talk with you. I think it's always interesting for startups that have proven the business model. I call it the fork in the road. Either you go raise a bunch more money or you start to talk to acquirers. You sold fairly early. Maybe talk about why you sold when you did, and lessons learned along the way, and any signals to pay attention to as the founder.
Sure. I guess ultimately there were 4 considerations that we had. I don't really have 4. I'm just going to make them up as I talk. So it sounds as if I really thought this through or something. So the first one was basically the changing dynamics in the marketplace. And so geolocation was heating up as a market at the same time. We thought at the time that the direction that we were heading in was one that some very large companies may enter. So we thought Google, as an example, may enter it as a supplement to what they were doing in local. Twitter at the time was thinking about providing geolocation as sort of a broad-based thing for its ecosystem. And so we saw these large players with very large ecosystems considering the space. I didn't mean they were going to move in that direction, but it was one consideration. Second, we thought it was a great place where our technology could actually have enormous impact and where our team could have enormous impact, because ultimately, again, there's this massive developer community that we had the potential to access. Third, we thought that there was upside because Twitter was a company that we felt could have a lot of multiples in terms of the valuation that it was at the time. And I think that's actually proven true right now with some of the rumors that are going around in the marketplace about them. And I said 4, so I have to come up with a 4th now. I really like Ev. So there you have it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That's good. And how about turning this same question of timing and when to start thinking about it over to the corp dev guys? Throw it out there. When should a startup start approaching you guys if you're not approaching them? When is a good time to build that relationship?
Well, I was on a panel with these guys in the summer, and I said there was no time too early. Feel free to reach out to us at any point. And we did got quite a few people reaching out very, very early. But that said, it's really sort of true. You don't need a big agenda. I think if you think, you should have a general sense of the different parts of our business and how you might fit in. But if you think there's a realistic way that it might fit in, feel free to reach out, and then we get a conversation going. It doesn't need to be, hey, I'm ready to sell and all those kind of things. I think in general, if you have something to show, meaning a product in market that's sort of beginning to get traction, that gives people more to talk about. But other than that, I think it's perfectly fine to have an early dialogue, and it takes time to sort of get to know people across the company. And I think sort of setting that stage so that you know the different people in the industry. Again, if you're sort of the theme of this night is sort of thinking about your exit, and I think there's usually a few places that are going to be a home. And as I said earlier, we focus a lot on fit, and frankly, you should too, because you're going to be working there for a few years afterwards, except in really extreme instances. And so, the more time you have to get to know people without the pressure of trying to get a deal done, it can make you more comfortable and confident when you get to the point of looking at different options. That the one that if it feels right, you can sort of be sure that it's not just emotion of the moment, that it's had time to sort of settle in and stuff. So I think it is good to go ahead and get started to know a bunch of different people, not just the corp dev people in the business.
Mike, anything to add?
No.
Good enough. Maybe a quick question for the corp dev guys. How many acquisitions started out as some sort of partnership or strategic joint venture, something else, and led to an acquisition? Is it half? Is it fewer than that?
I would say almost all of the deals that we do tend to be, at least from our standpoint, very broadly viewed. So we're looking at it from what can we do together, and if acquisition makes the most sense, then that's the route we go. So many times I'm in the room with my BizDev counterparts.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say in the nature of the conversation that's absolutely true. Is that, you know, again, you sort of have these meetings and you're trying to sort through what could we do together, and then, you know, just like Elon talked about, there's sometimes when it heads one way, and sometimes when you sort of hit a point and you say, wait a second, this really only makes sense if we're going to go ahead and do the acquisition. In terms of, I think, maybe the specific other side of the question of, you know, people who are existing partners and then leading to acquisition, I'm sort of pulling a number out of thin air, but maybe 50%, there's some sort of, you know, business relationship already in place.
Cool.
Yeah, I would say some companies we're talking to now, and at least one acquisition we've made, we had either some sort of business arrangement. It's one of these things where with little companies, because we're bigger, we feel like if we do a partnership, we're going to make them big and successful, which is good. I mean, that's great that companies become big and successful in working with us. But if it then puts us in a position where, you know, we could kind of become held hostage to that company, or we can't control our destiny, or things may not go the way we anticipate in the future, it can become challenging. And so we try to cut that off at the pass and say, listen, probably better for our interests to try to acquire this company now so that we can build value together, rather than have more of an arm's length relationship where in the future, if there's conflict, it's going to be more challenging for both sides. So there are some circumstances where that happens, where it makes more sense to acquire now rather than partner with the company so that they grow, and then you have to think about what to do down the road.
Yeah, good. All right, another topic I want to cover before we open it up is valuation and deal structure. This is a perennial favorite of folks. I think more energy is spent worrying about valuation than just about anything else. I mean, I'll start with you. How do you establish a valuation, especially at a very early stage company, in the absence of comps, maybe early revenue or even pre-revenue? Or you know, let's call it early revenue. You know, how are you establishing a valuation? What are you looking at?
We have a magnetic dartboard in the Corp Dev team.
Dartboarding?
Yeah. No, I mean, for a private company that's small and a small team, maybe unproven technology, no revenue yet, it's difficult. We have one luxury, which is we're a comp maker in the Valley. So we can look back at our previous deals, and we use advisors and lawyers who also give us an idea of the other deals that are happening in the Valley. So we have a pretty good idea of what's happening in the market, also through the VC network, in terms of valuation. But again, for those types of situations where you can't do a DCF and you can't do traditional comp analysis in a public market, it's really a negotiated valuation.
Yeah.
You look at what you've done in the past that had similar size, similar build time, similar size team, who the VCs are, what kind of returns are they going to expect, how much money has gone into the company, and you do your best to come up with something that's a win-win and reflects the market, and then it's negotiated.
Is Naval's metric of 1 to 2 million per engineer sound about right? Is that something you know, you can look at as a baseline comp depending on the heat of the deal?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily actually characterize it that way, because I'm not sure we necessarily do deals that are purely just, you know, a corp dev deal that is really a hiring exercise.
Got it.
I mean, those kind of things lead to sort of perverse incentives to, like, you know, staff up with engineers too. Right. So I think it's sort of those are a little funny. I mean, the other thing too, I mean, to sort of twist the question a little bit, but I mean, we, you know, frankly, in terms of trying, I think we fundamentally view an M&A transaction as a collaborative sort of beginning to a relationship that we're going to have. And so, you know, the you know, sort of two deals that we've done this year, the Citizen Sports and the Dapper deal, like both of those, you know, the leadership team has come in and like taken bigger roles beyond just the business they were running pretty quickly. And frankly, we're looking to sort of get a feel for when that can happen and when that can do it. So in order to sort of put together a deal, sort of my assumption is, yes, companies are bought, not sold, and I definitely understand that. But at the flip side, I can't make anyone sell that doesn't want to sell, and I can't sort of make them take a price, and so I don't even try. I think we focus very much on trying to pay a fair price for a business that we both believe that we can make bigger together. And so one of the sort of rules that we have is we won't put an offer out without sort of seeing the cap table and understand the dynamics of what you're facing, because frankly, sometimes that helps you a lot, because we realize, just due to the natures of the venture world, that sometimes we maybe need to stretch a little bit, more, just in order to sort of keep all the stakeholders happy. It's one of those things where, within a realm of reason, sometimes you can do those things, and it's in everyone's interest to sort of get the facts on the table and sort of understand what the real dynamics are that's going on in the boardroom when you're having these discussions.
I guess from my perspective, I do think that the multiple per engineer thing is true. For basically when companies are buying teams versus buying either a strategic asset like an AdMob, or alternatively something for cash flow like what IAC may be more likely to do. If you had the exact same product and you had twice the number of people and the product wasn't getting very much traction and you sold it, you'd get more for it. So there is that team buy aspect. The second point I'd like to make is around valuation from the perspective of, I think valuations can be misleading in two ways. And so I've been helping out some people who've been doing deals, especially on the smaller side in some cases, so say $5 to $10 million acquisitions. And in that case, certain things can actually cause really big movements in the value that the entrepreneur ends up with. And I think there are 4 or 5 of those. The first is the lockup period, or the vesting schedule. If you're not going to stick around, say that you have a 3-year vest and you leave after a year, you just left 2/3 of the value on the table as an entrepreneur. You may have gotten some up front, but fundamentally you need to take that into account. So a $10 million acquisition where you own 40% of the company or 30% because you haven't raised a lot of money could be worth $1 million to you instead of $3 or $4 million, or whatever multiple on top of that. So that's one thing. Second is dividending out cash or not. If you have $1 million that you raised in cash in the bank and somebody's buying you for $5 million and you don't dividend out the cash, you just subsidize the acquisition by $1 million. So you just reduce the deal value by 20%. Third is the upside of the currency. So some companies are going to have multiples in terms of where they are today, especially certain private companies, and some aren't. And so that also impacts the upside that you have. And so I think ultimately just straight valuation is a little bit misleading, and you should really take into account all those different factors when you're considering selling a very early stage company.
Yeah, Mike, anything to add on the valuation?
No, I think Elad's point is really good. I think it's really right. I'll add one additional piece. It's just one thing that goes into our consideration is managing kind of the esprit de corps of the Facebook engineering team. And I think this was mentioned a little bit, but we can't just spread extra frosting all over these new engineers that are coming in, because for folks who have joined us through the front door, it's, I think, pretty frustrating. It's kind of a shitty thing to do, where you look at the guy to your right or the woman to your left and you say, wait a minute, why did this person get a significantly better deal than I did? And we face that, and we take that really seriously. So I was in an engineering meeting recently with directors talking about buying a company for about $20 million of Facebook stock. And we got a significant amount of pushback from some of the engineering directors who said, well, wait a minute, do we really, really value these people that much? Because we could take 10 superstar engineers from Google, just kidding, that we really, really admire. And we could provide each of those 10 superstars a $2 million bonus, right? 10 times 2 is 20. And people take those alternatives very seriously in terms of how we're using our company's money. And I think our engineers, they'll say it. Listen, if we hire someone who's kind of a reputed superstar, and someone will say, yeah, okay, I get it that that person maybe got paid better than I did because they're a superstar and I'm just a normal star or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think that doesn't disrupt the spirit of the company that much. But managing an engineering culture and scaling it where you're trying to keep hundreds or I mean, maybe someday Facebook will have thousands of engineers. Certainly these companies do because they're bigger and successful. It's hard to